Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Waigel, for this enlightening presentation and hopeful for the future of Europe. Now the questions, Professor Matlari, Professor Hösle.
Thank you very much. I come from Norway. We are passive members of the EU in the European Economic Agreement, and I wish we were active members, as we ought to be. But the question of democracy, of influencing decisions, has come up as a major one in Europe today, having been completely uninteresting for about 20 years, 30 years perhaps. As long as the EU has delivered so well on the economic issues, nobody has been very concerned about democratic accountability. And now Brexit is in part a reaction to on this question, and of course Britain has been preoccupied with democracy for a long time with regard to the EU. And the Visegrad countries are also calling for reform because they experienced majority voting on migration quotas in 2016 and resented that. So I think we are going to have a major call for some kind of intergovernmental conference again about the EU. And I would submit to you that the real democratic accountability issues concern the European Parliament, which is a confederal structure. It's not a federation, it's not intergovernmental, but it hangs in the balance there without any clear role. It was an assembly that assisted. It was a parliamentary assembly that NATO has and the OSCE and others have without real powers until the Lisbon Treaty. And now, all of a sudden, it has half the decision-making power of the EU's legislation, which is an amazing change, and I don't think anybody really thought through the implications of that. In addition, Lisbon brought Pillar 1 and Pillar 3 of Maastricht into the decision-making procedure of majority voting and a community process, which is also controversial when you see how much is subsumed under justice and home affairs. So I think there is a way forward would be to really have this discussion about democratic accountability. What is in a way reasonable? Because the EU's economic results are amazing, and clearly the internal market is the biggest achievement of the EU. Your comments on that, please.
Most things you mentioned, I can agree. It's of course more difficult to have 28 or 27 members as in former time 9, 12 or 15. But it's not easy from time to time to have partners as Orban or some other people, of course. But I remember the representatives of the Middle and Eastern countries 30 and 35 years ago. And the people we have now are not always very sympathetic, but better than 30 or 35 years ago. And there is one institution which is able to bring more democratic system and practices in this country. That is only the EU. The EU. They have deficits, they have problems, they have not solved all, but they are the only system, the only institution which is able to make pressure and to correct something in this country. That is not easy, and that takes sometimes a long time, but it is the only possibility. I don't think that Brexit is going back to lack of democratic practices in the EU. No, that is Great Britain since 45 has always the problem sometimes to be in and sometimes to go out. That begins from Churchill, and that was a big mistake of David Cameron to solve this with a referendum. That was a big mistake. The young people didn't take part in the referendum, therefore we had the consequences. Now we have to solve the problem to make, I hope so, a comfortable departure. It would be better for all for us, and then we should try to have a good partnership to UK and to hope for a later time. I agree to you that the Parliament is very important and should have more responsibilities in the future. I think that is necessary, but also at the time they have a big influence for our law system. And I agree to you, the majority and the decisions with majority should be stronger, and you only can be successful on a long time if not one country alone can resist all the projects. That is necessary. And Lisbon, I think, has brought some progress, but that's not enough. Europe is not easy, and I can write a book about the problems I have, more than everyone in Germany, And in spite of this, I think it was a good time, and we have a good result, and we should be optimistic for the future.
We have five more people who asked for the floor. Please formulate your questions very shortly. Thank you. Hösle.
You insisted on the United States in Europe, not of Europe. What exactly does this mean? I know, of course, that in Germany we use the term Staatenverbund as an alternative both to Staatenbund, which would be confederacy, and Bundesstaat, which would be federal state. But frankly, I never understood what that exactly means. I tend to believe in the traditional dichotomy that a Bundesstaat, a federal state, is a state where the single states cannot make decisions regarding the constitution of the whole without cooperation of the federal center. Where in a confederacy the sovereignty remains with the member states, they can leave at pleasure. And it seems to me that now with Brexit it becomes evident that the European Union is a complex form of confederacy and nothing more. Second question, you are optimistic for the future, and I would love to share your optimism. Certainly I share the pride in what your generation with people like you as leaders have achieved in Europe. That is one of the great historical achievements in Europe's history. The reason why I would simply have better grounds for my optimism is that if I look at history, the transition from looser forms of confederacies to federal states is extraordinarily rare. The United States of America is the most famous example, and it happened because the 13 member states of a confederation were historically, linguistically, legally very, very close to each other. There was a certain threat from outside. In most other cases, like in Germany or in the Netherlands, it was a result of force, either from outside in the Netherlands or from one power within in Germany. What will be the forces that will bring us forward, since we don't want to have violence?
May I remind us that we have an hour for a general discussion at the end of the day, so that those who cannot speak now would be able to have the floor later.
try to do it very shorten. Yes, Mr. Professor Hösle, we have a special situation, and the reason was a decision of the High Court. The High Court, Bundesverfassungsgericht, said, okay, it's not a state, it's not bounding of states, and it's not a federal system, it's Staatenverbund, bounding states. It was a compromise. I say for the future of Europe, we need a Europe of concentric circles. An inner circle and then some others. Inner circle, the European Union with the currency. And then the other circle, and each country has the possibility to enter and to join. No closed shop, no closed circle. And then the countries in Europe which will try to join Europe, to help them from the EU. And then the cooperation with other states as Turkey, and I think they cannot be member in the inner circle of Europe. And also to try to have a contact and to have a bond with Russia. It's not easy, but of course we all the time should be ready to do that and to give offers. And with this flexible system, I think we could solve the next 10 or 20 years. And maybe later on, we can create the states of Europe.
We have time for one question. Professor Carrozza.
Thank you. I will be very brief. One way of interpreting the narrative that you've provided is that Europe begins as a great political and moral project in which economic life serves as an instrument to achieve it. And that the more recent crisis, in some sense, represents perhaps a loss or a diminishment or dissipation of that great spiritual, moral, political ideal in favor of merely the economic project, and that's part of the crisis. That seems to be suggested also by the words of Benedict that you're quoting. So my question is this: from where would the great moral ideal that sustains the economic project come from today? What could give it life again? What would regenerate it, especially in an era of widespread secularization and the absence of many of the common values of the continent? A second very brief question is this. You mentioned early the recognition of subsidiarity as one of the achievements of the Union. At the end, you say that one of the things that's needed is that subsidiarity, quote, must be brought to life. So implying implicitly that previously it wasn't, it was only given in name. I wonder what you mean by that. What in practice, how do you envision subsidiarity being brought to life in an authentic way that it wasn't early on?
I think the last crisis, the economic crisis, was not a crisis of the European currency system. It came from the United States. The United States, with their problems in the financial system, they brought the consequences also to us. It was not a problem of the European currency. But in this sense, there was remarkable that some countries didn't use the euro credit and what they earned from the euro to reduce their debts, and they did not use the money for more investments for the future. That was the problem. Of course, I can understand this. They gave it to social projects. That is understandable and that's nice, but that's not helpful for the future of the states. And therefore we had the problems, and we solved the problems. The help programs from Europe to Ireland, to Portugal, to Spain, and to Cyprus were absolutely successful, and now they have accession to the world financial system. And also Greece is, in spite of some problems, some years, Varoufakis was not an excellent, not such a great finance minister as in the public scene. It's visible from time to time. Okay? But now they have recognized that nothing from that, what they told to the voters, can be fulfilled. They have changed their policy radically, and now they are on a good way. Subsidiarity, I think there could be done something. Great problems have to be solved from the European community, but many things can be done from the regions and from the states, many. I will tell you some examples. In my home in the neighborhood in Memmingen, there is a little theater, and they make theater for handicapped people. I think that is wonderful. I'm coming from Ursberg, a very great institution for handicapped people. I have lived all my time with handicapped people. To make such a project, wonderful, but not from Brussels. That, I think, has to be done from the Bavarian Minister for Education or for Science. And when we make a very nice walking path through the wood in the Allgäu, in the mountains, it's wonderful. My wife likes this. But must be that done from Brussels? No. The Bavarian economic minister or for agriculture should do this. And that are examples for subsidiarity to bring back some responsibilities to the countries and to the regions.
Thank you very much. I think it's exactly time for the next presentation. We'll have a chance to come back to the questions you wish to put later on. So, I am going to give the floor to Professor Waigel, who is Professor for Law and Governance in New Delhi and has published several books on ethnic diversity and governance of public institutions in the context of India. Please, you have the floor. Thank you.